The rain hammered the cobblestones in Bexar that night, each drop drumming the yes no of that gallery's decision into my bones. My violin case rattled along at my side, glistening like the wet streets, heavy in my grip as I trailed into the shadows after Rui de Silva stamped my proposal with a perfunctory shake of his head. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. "We're full for this season," he said, already glancing around at the red wine laughter of Lisbon's art crowd crowding his gallery doorway, a softer rain under the awning. "Maybe submit something less experimental next year." Behind him, a younger cellist slipped inside, her father, a magistrate, gripping her shoulder. My shoes slid on the marble step as I tried not to stare. Every motion felt like a public humiliation, water sluicing down my jacket, curls sticking to my forehead, the ticket stub from my last gig dissolving in my pocket. Lisbon glittered beneath jaundiced lamps. I remembered my mother's shrill silence at breakfast, the disapproving mouth of my aunt Dona Margarida when I talked about a genre-melding violin concerto. "Stick to Fado if you want people to clap," she'd sniffed. "Nobody pays for fantasy." The walk home dripped with old guilt, the air smelled of stale coffee, rain-wet tile, disappointment. I wanted to scream, but the city would not have cared. Not for the failed daughter of a tilemaker, with nothing to show for 4 years of practice but a blank calendar and sore wrists. Inside our crumbling flat, my mother was scouring olive oil from a stained dish. She didn't turn as I entered. "How'd it go?" she asked evenly, her back straight, her hands red from the water. "Same as always." She nodded, water dripped from my cuffs to the floor. "Next time," she said. I waited for a smile, but she scrubbed harder. My room was a shoebox of torn posters and dried-out rosin. Not even the family cat bothered to move when I entered, circling into my one suitcase for what warmth he could steal. The ceiling leaked. Sometimes I imagined myself dissolving into the plaster, a ghost fiddling while the house slowly collapsed. Weeks passed, my jobs evaporated, my last wedding gig paid in leftover codfish, the priest's smile thin, word had circled back. "Yuriko's daughter thinks she's Paganini but doesn't play for her neighbors' parties. You know where you belong," Dona Margarida said at Mass in the real world. I stopped showing up for afternoon tea, stopped answering the phone when Tia Ini Circumflex tried to match me up with a pharmacist's son. Instead, I played in secret, abandoned Fenster banks my audience, seagulls my choir. My concerto grew strange and wild, full of Fado sighs and bursts of frantic modern rhythm. In the lean winter light, music was the only thing with any color left. I put headphones on and drowned in it, pretending I couldn't hear the radio from my mother's room, where she listened to stories of musicians who left for Berlin or Paris and became someone. I could taste her resignation in the soup she made, could see it in the way she folded my father's overalls before work. On the coldest day of January, after the gallery's final rejection letter arrived, I drank too much Sagas atop the Santa Justa lift and watched the city drop away. In that empty sky, an ugly, dangerous thought sprouted: leave and never come back. I did. I wrote a letter in careful script, hands barely shaking, and sent it to a friend studying at Hochschule für Musik Hans Eisler in Berlin. "Is there room on your floor for a night or two?" I asked. She wrote back, "Yes, bring something warm and play for me." My mother handed me an envelope before dawn. "Don't waste money," she said, frowning. But inside there were €50 and a St. Anthony medal scuffed with hope and worry. The plane lifted off as the sun scrubbed lemon light over Alfama's tile roofs. Neither of us waved. Berlin was not Lisbon. The wind was sharper, the language brittle and unyielding. There, nobody cared about Dona Margarida's gossip. Nobody knew I'd bombed at every gallery since age 17. Nobody even noticed me as I hunched over my violin, hands cramped from the cold, playing open mics at smoky cafes. The coins in my case were heavy and indifferent, but here pity was cleaner. The city was brutal sometimes, my socks rarely dry, my belly often hollow, but around me possibility. Musicians who bickered in 5 languages, who played for love and spite and when needed bread. I found work as rehearsal assistant at the conservatory, tuning pianos late at night and sneaking in practice when no one listened. I played my unfinished concerto for empty rooms, growing stranger still. After one humid April, a visiting instructor from Prague heard me. His name was Jacob. "Lisbon girl," he called me. "You play like you're running from fire and your mother's laughter." That night he insisted I play for his masterclass. I nearly vomited with nerves, but when it was done there was silence, a big hot silence, the kind that hovers before change. Someone clapped, others joined. Jacob stepped forward. "You have something. What do you want for it?" I want to wake up and not regret leaving, I said. He smiled. For the first time I felt almost seen. My Berlin years scraped and soothed me. I heard myself on student broadcasts. Sold a handful of weird, stitched-together compositions. I learned to teach by necessity more than kindness. My mother's phone calls grew more brittle. She told me about Dona Margarida's niece, married, 2 children, full cabinets. I pictured them secure as the Lisbon summer heat and said little, but sometimes my mother listened to my demos. I could hear her breath catch across the miles. When my concerto finally took its shape, something between a Lisbon dawn and a Berlin night, I dared to submit it unsigned to an open call for the Gulbenkian Foundation's international season. The email was terse, the hope smaller than a match flame. I didn't sleep waiting for a reply. When it came, my skin prickled. An invitation to perform not as an also-ran but as a headline feature for their new Vision series. Payment, travel, accommodation. A homecoming whether I wanted one or not. Lisbon waited, smug and blue as ever in late spring, as the tram rattled toward Avenida de Berna. The city had not changed, but I was foreign to it, almost reluctant to be recognized. Sun-washed stone, jam perfuming the air, graffiti on the arches, home and not home at once. I stayed in a pension across from the park, too restless for the family flat. My old friends were shadows on WhatsApp, my relatives an ache I wore feverishly. The local press did not care. But someone must have spread word, because at rehearsal, Dona Margarida's hair loomed in the back row, helmet stiff and unsmiling. The day of the performance, Lisbon was gold and clean-edged from rain. The Foundation's recital hall shimmered with wood and glass, a hush throbbing before the crowd arrived. I tuned my violin, old and battered, and tried not to remember my mother spooning thick soup and scraping at stains that never left. The audience bubbled in, aunts, uncles, neighbors, a scattering of strangers and sneering acquaintances. My mother sat upright near the aisle, 2 rows from the front, her face unreadable behind heavy glasses. I stepped into the knife light. Time battered my chest, rain at the gallery, the airport's sterile emptiness, the hunger, the teaching, the odd warmth of acceptance thousands of miles away. That whole storm was in the first whisper of my bow. The opening was nothing like tradition, a scraping, hollow keening, the sound of a doorway opened then slammed. I heard an old man cough, a child squirmed. Beneath it all, my mother's hands knotted and released, nerves like distant thunder. I played my own history, the tension and rejection, the secret aching joy, slideshow of rain, tile, parental silence. When the melody flickered into something familiar, part Fado, part broken baroque, we both heard the city sing, bruised and unrepentant. When the last note died, there was a breathless moment, then applause, real and compulsive, nothing polite or obligatory. Tears slipped from my mother's cheeks. Even Dona Margarida St. George stood. My limbs shook as I bowed, finally seen. After a reception in the foyer, low tables cluttered with vinho verde and pastéis, my aunts moved among the guests, their voices lower than before, softer now, almost proud. Dona Margarida hovered, mouth full of complaint, until she spotted a minor local celebrity shaking my hand. Rui da Silva, gallery owner, approached with a flute of champagne. "We could open next season with your work," he murmured too loudly. "Lisbon needs voices like yours." I smiled, gentle but stiff. Time had softened 1,000 petty slights, but I remembered the rain and his eyes looking past me. "Thank you," I said. "Perhaps next year, my schedule's rather full." Stories spread quickly after that, a headline in the culture section, interviews, invitations, grudging admiration from old teachers. Family friends began mentioning me with a pride that rung false but felt familiar, Lisbon staking a claim even after indifference. Later, at home, my mother waited at the kitchen table. The cat circled my ankles, purring. She reached for my hand and squeezed it hard, as when I scraped my knees as a child. "You did it," she said softly. For a moment, I was a child again, proud for her approval. But there was room beneath the pride, anger that sat beside tenderness, old as the first gallery that closed its door to me. "I had to," I replied, my voice steady, serene. "I did not want to vanish." She nodded. Rain battered the city again, but this time Lisbon felt open, soft-edged, full of the music I had carried away and brought home, a proof at last that I belonged just as much as anyone who never left.